A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jazz from Jazz Real Estate Group in Point Cook. I hope you guys are doing great. Guys, today's session is around obviously a case study and talking about the sale case study for about 2/47, what I have in Boulevard. I'll share my screen. I'll give you a little bit more context and information about it and how the sale process was handled, how the marketing was handled, how everything panned out. So I'll try to keep it as quick and easy as possible. Now, this information will be a lot more valuable than you would think. Now, to give you a quick perspective around what happened with that sale was the number one thing that certainly comes to my mind, and how the process should be taken care of by the client itself and as an investor. So it's more of an educational piece to understand what things you should be doing and what things you shouldn't be sort of keeping yourself away from as well. I'll do a quick screen share and show you which property I'm talking about. Now, I am here at the sold section of our listings. And if I show you number 2/47, Waterhaven Boulevard, it was a unit in Waterhaven, which is not far from our office. It's approximately 170 square meters block, two-bedroom unit in Waterhaven, in one of the newer complexes, which has just been built a few years ago. The gentleman who sold the property, our client, they bought it off the plan, and the property was a rental. It was an investment property. It was a very smart investment, good quality property, double story. Sorry, my bad. Double glazed windows, and the property had a lot of features which attract a lot of investors and owner occupiers. People starting out, or perhaps downsizers, and investors were quite interested in buying the property. Now, there were some challenges with that. The property got sold for $500,000. It was a pretty good outcome compared to some of the recent sales of two-bedroom townhouses were in the vicinity of about 430 to about 470. My understanding with the clients was obviously that we don't have many properties of similar nature in the market, so we could potentially try in the vicinity of around 500,000. They had few other agents out there said, and everyone was sort of coming between the vicinity of about 450 to 470, and they were on the same page, being bankers themselves, to understand if there's not much out there, how can you justify the value by just seeing a couple of properties sold in the marketplace? So one of the things that obviously played here was the property's condition was very well kept and very well looked after. That was the number one key factor. The other thing which played a key role was the fixtures and fittings and the quality of the property itself. There were some challenges, as I said. The property had about 2 years lease, and the lease was running out in 2024. The point we launched the property, and this is what we do with our clients, for our landlords and our investors, that when a property is tenanted, we love to create a good relationship with the tenants, even if the tenants are looked after by us, or we're managing the property in our rentals department, or the rental is looked after by another agency for that matter. First thing is relationship. Even if you're buying, selling, or obviously putting your property in the market, as an agent, your role to break the ice with the buyers and obviously try to be in a position where you can have emotional intelligence and have empathy for the buyers to understand their needs and requirements, to be able to get yourself as an agent in a position where you can negotiate in the best possible way. If it's a private sale, and obviously auctions are different and it requires different skill set. Now, in this instance, we met the tenants first. We sat down with them, explained the whole process, and they were pretty much on the same page, and they were giving us full cooperation until a point where everything turned. Now, the first few inspections were pretty good. We had a lot of buyers coming through, and we were in a position of putting a deal together for our vendor. A lot of the buyers who were coming in were also looking to move in. That was one of the challenge, but there was a 2 years fixed term lease. Some of the time, some tenants do agree to move out on the property, out of the property. Obviously, some people would expect some sort of compensation, or perhaps some people are very nice and they'll just agree and cooperate and work with yourself and help you in the transition. Now, in this instance here, when we built a relationship, rather than just going in or perhaps emailing the tenant saying we are organizing the photos and video for that matter, and we're starting the open homes on such and such day. The agent turns up at the property, does their open home, and leaves, and there's no relationship between the agent and the tenants or the residents of the property. It becomes challenging because you haven't built that rapport, because you never know when you need that person. So, or even if not that's the case, but again, at the same time, it's critical to have good relationships with people anyways. So the time came when we had an indication where the tenant's family members might be interested in the property as well. So what happened there was, as soon as we got that indication, we try to grab as much information as possible from the tenant, like the name of the family members, just to sort of build rapport about the family, how many people in the family, where they live, and all those sort of things. So a couple of things that as a negotiator you need to focus on is what people say and what people are trying to say. So there's two different aspects of it. People are saying something, but they mean something else. It's always the case, or perhaps many of the times, especially when buyer says something along the line, say, for an example, I don't see value at this property at a certain price. Then a lot of the times we see the agents would say, well, we're not selling at a price where you're offering as well. Versus you have a paradigm shift and ask them a question why they don't see value in the property at a certain price, what else they've seen, have they been in the market quite a long time before they're looking at this property, and have they made many offers before? How is the journey at that point of time as well? So I guess all these little factors do play a massive role. So understanding the buyer needs and obviously the understanding of the process is critical. Now, the key element here was the tenant's family live in the area from last about roughly 15, 20 years or so. And this gentleman who lived in the property was their parent. And they had a dire need where they had to sort of buy a property for their father because they were sick and tired of moving houses a lot in the last few years. That gave us an edge to negotiate. Now, the challenge was we knew that if someone wants to move in, they would not make it easy for the other parties or perhaps the owners to accommodate that request. So it was paramount that we negotiate as high as possible with the family, if at all they come in to negotiate as well, and that's exactly what happened. We had a lot of information out for the purchasers or potential purchasers who were the family members of the tenant already. I got a phone call from a person from a no caller ID asking me the bottom line price and all those sort of things without giving me the information. But obviously, I could gather the name of the person. And I suppose that gave me an indication that that person is actually related to the tenant. So thereafter, when we were negotiating with them, when they came into the office to negotiate, that's where we wanted them to be at. It's not that we randomly invited them to the office. It's a pre-planned process. There's a process around negotiating. It's either at the property face to face or at the office itself. So the family members of the tenants came in with a lower offer at about $440,000 or $450,000 to start with, roughly around those lines, and said the property is not ideal, it's too small, and all those sort of things people would say. Rather than taking that offer to the vendor and saying they don't like the property but they still want to buy it, it doesn't really make sense to myself, for me and my team to be able to go to the vendor and justify that offer. We asked them a lot of questions. The meeting started at about 4 o'clock. We finished at about 5:55. And I remember it was roughly about 2 hours negotiations with them and asking them a lot of questions about if they don't like the property, why are they even buying it? What are the things that they like about the property? And thereafter, they started opening up a little bit more to the tenants' family members. Why did they choose the property beforehand? There was a question that we asked. Like, if the property was not ideal, why did you have your father live in that property for a 2 years lease? And we also knew for a fact that the property management company who was managing the property is really good friends with them as well. So there was another challenge that we had to sort of overcome and understand, because if their professional advice is affecting the decision-making process, we need to work on that before we negotiate on a price and the outcome as well. So they came up with some stats on the house domain and other websites saying the property is worth approximately around that on these websites. And my question to the purchasers was, if one of the portals is coming up at 440, 450, 460, 470, what have you, what if I come up with a portal saying it's $590,000? Would they pay $590,000 for the property? The big conversation here, guys, is to understand why are they coming up with that level of offer and at what level they are happy to miss out. You need to find that out really quickly as well. So that was the whole conversation with them around what if they miss out on the property? What are they losing? They need to understand. So a lot of the questions that we ask out of obviously toolkit, which is here, and the practice over the years, and we practice the negotiations throughout the week. Because what they say is, if you bleed in the battle, sorry, bleed in the training, you won't bleed much in the battle. So I suppose that's critical. Um, Now, in terms of the questions that we asked them was around what the property is for, why they're buying the property, why is it right for you, versus what's wrong about the property and why it's not ideal. Because that let's get it right, which was told to them as well. Let's get it right, because if you're buying the property still feeling that there's some issues in the property, perhaps the rooms are smaller, for an example, the reality is that you're still buying the property. There's something that you like. Let's think about those things and see what are the pros and cons about the property. Help them to feel that you're helping them making a decision. And at that point of time, they started talking good things about the property as well. And as well as other things that we said to them, which obviously I can't really disclose and go into much, because that's something depends on obviously every negotiation, every case is different. So we put our case forward to them saying that because of XYZ reasons, and you've just agreed to these things as well, and you've just said them by yourself, I feel that it's the right ideal price for the property is roughly around the higher end of the range where we were trying to sort of target as well as a reference point, we call it in a negotiation. So at that level of conversation, the husband of the purchaser started discussing, because obviously his name was to go on the contract, and or perhaps in relations to obviously understanding where he's positioning himself at. So going back and forth for about an hour and a half, we ended up with the process where we negotiated the price upwards, and they came up to a certain level at about 500,000. So what people start at, or where people start at versus what they're willing to pay, is sometimes really unknown until you start dissecting everything and ask a lot of questions. I'm trying to make them understand the value of the property as well. People would have their own understanding and opinion on the property anyways. However, if you're able to have a paradigm shift in their mindset, then certainly makes it easier. Now, one thing I say to my clients, and one thing I learned, and one thing I knew that there would be some challenges, but again, at the same time, until you start the process, you'd never know. So one thing I say to my clients is try to refrain from having a long-term fixed-term lease if you think that you may sell in the next 6 to 12 months. Or personally, as an investor, I would never put myself in a position where I lock myself in on a tenancy agreement for 2 to 3 years, because things change in people's life. I've seen so many times things change. You may feel that you want to hold on to the property for 2 3 years. A good job opportunity comes in, you have to move interstate, or perhaps you have to buy over there as well. So you need asset, your accountants, or perhaps your brokers suggest you to sell, and you get to a point where you restrict yourself with less options, because if someone wants to move in and your tenants decide not to move out and they are well within their rights to do so, then you are stuck with a small pool of buyers if you're lucky, and you're lucky if you get the price that you're looking for, perhaps a right price for your property. So that's one of the other parts which is quite critical as well. Now, one thing I say to my clients is always focus on the process. The process is market the property well. If you market the property well, you reach out to a lot of buyers in the marketplace. You have more options to play with, and people would perceive value. It's like buying something from Big W, the same thing you buy from Myers will have a different perceived value for it, because the same product could be different price, but you feel better about paying more because the packaging, the environment, the ambience what have you, the whole kit and caboodle is certainly make that massive difference as well. So marketing is something that you need to focus on. Presentation and marketing of your property is critical. Now, we know there's so many different portals now you can negotiate, you can advertise your property at. You need, personally, if I was to sort of sell, and I've recently sold, and I've put my property in every portal as possible, where I can probably see value in. Now, once you have that, and then obviously how you negotiate at the open homes is another skill that your real estate agent should bring on the table. Is your real estate agent only skilled in opening up the door, grabbing the details and the names of the buyers, and then just following up and saying, um, you came to XYZ Smith Street. Did you like the property? No, that's fine. Thank you so much for your time. Versus you have a healthy conversation with the buyers when they came in, what else they're looking at, how long they've been in the market. Because guess what? That moment when you call them back, you have a chance of grabbing as much information as possible. Because in the next day or two, if they come back and negotiate with yourself, then you have a very good edge and understand a little bit more about them and position yourself to get the maximum outcome. Then it comes down to your skills to negotiate. If you are simply a messenger saying the vendors are not accepting their offer, we're not taking their offer, and sorry, we're not even interested in talking to you, that's a disaster for a seller. You need to be in a position to know how to negotiate. You need to train yourself and role play and practice that within your office and your team to ensure that you get the best of that time, because you only have small windows. Every buyer is different. Sometimes people are time poor. They don't have time to meet you again and again. You can't have a hit and miss. You need to be able to negotiate at that time. Be prepared when that meeting is about to start or beforehand. If you can take care of the process here, you are the winner. You can easily win. And obviously, there's other parts to it after the property is sold, which is how the contracts are written and how the contracts are sealed in terms of how tight the conditions are to secure the vendor's interest as well. So all these things, I can go on pretty much all day on that, but we'll finish off on this part today. So what I say to my clients in a wrap is my personal advice is don't lock yourself in for a long-term lease. Always ensure that the property is presented really well. Go around the house and ensure that the property, as a buyer, how would you perceive value? If you go and buy a property and you go and see 20 different houses in the marketplace, how does your property stand out? And how is the marketing working for you? Are you getting enough clicks? Are you getting enough buyers through the doors as well? Is your agent doing a good follow up? Are they sending you campaign performance reports? Are they sending you any other updates throughout? How intensely the agent is keeping in touch with yourself? All these things are critical. How many number of callback sessions the buyer callback sessions have been done by the agent? How much information they're trying to extract? How much on the value that you're trying to sort of achieve from your agency as well? A lot of different factors play in when you get an outcome. We see a lot of the times that a property got sold at a certain price. We can kind of tell that the potential of the property was a lot more higher, but it's sold for an average market or below average market price. There's always a reason why. Sometimes the agents are too desperate to come in and they don't really advise the vendors um, to work on their property to ensure it works out well. Some some agents will just come in and go with the cheapest marketing because they feel that's the right thing for the client without even understanding that client may be in a position to sort of go into the marketing package which is going to help them long run. No vendor wakes up in the morning, or I should make it easier, no seller wakes up in the morning and say, I'm going to list my property today and I'll be selling it for cheap. So having an understanding on your product, having an understanding on the market knowledge, having an understanding on how to market the property is really critical as an agent. So if you are thinking of perhaps choosing an agent, these are the things which are quite critical. Asking them how well you'll be negotiating for me. Do a role play with your agent. Ask them questions, because every person wearing a suit, for an example, working in real estate is not the same. What's here is making a massive difference in the industry. So I always urge my clients and our vendors in that community to perhaps ask questions to the agent. What's their plan with their property? Every property is unique in its own nature. and requires separate attention. So, guys, with this, I'll wrap up. And I know it's a bit of a casual session today, but I thought it's really important that I bring it up for you. So, if you have any questions, let us know. Would love to help and support and assist yourself with any of your property need. Thank you so much for your time, and you have a great day.